Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the next Bond of Love interview hosted by the Vaishnavi Ministry of North America, which is celebrating the beautiful book Bond of Love. In this series, we speak with Srila Prabhupada's female disciples to be edified by hearing of their experiences in Krishna consciousness. And today, it's a very special pleasure for me to welcome my dear God sister and friend Jyotirmayi dasi. And we're going to be doing this interview a little differently. We're going to be doing it together right here in front of you instead of at two different locations. So before Jyotirmayi comes on, I just would like to introduce you to her. This is Jyotirmayi Prabhu joined London in December 1969 when Prabhupada installed Radha London Ishvara Deities. Her first services were going on Harinam sankirtan 3 times a day, painting deities and painting paintings, and she was later trained as a cook. After 6 months, she returned to France from where she was born, and there she did sankirtan. She also was the temple commander and began translating Srila Prabhupada's books into French. In Hambourg, Germany, she kept translating and became the head Pujari. In New York, she joined the BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and continued her work with the French BBT along with her husband, Yogesvara. At that time, she was also the Bhaktin leader and cooked the weekly Sunday feast, which I heard was also awesome. After returning to Paris, she became the head translator for the BBT. She also was the translator for Prabhupada during his classes, conferences, and conversations with dignitaries when he was in France. And we're going to hear more about that. She was a regular lecturer for the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita classes, and Sunday feast lectures. She organized and spoke at university conferences, and in distributing books to professors, she was able to obtain reviews for Srila Prabhupada's French Bhagavad Gita. She was New Mayapur Gurukula's headmistress and an academic and ashram teacher. In New York and Belgium, she was a nursery and kindergarten teacher. You can see the varied services she's had. She worked on children's books with Yogesvara for their publishing house called Bala Books in New York. Upon returning to France, again, she was the headmistress, ashram, and academic teacher. She was also in charge of public relations with the media in Paris. In later years, she was the regional secretary for the French GBT and became a women's ministry member, now known as the Vaishnavi Ministry. She contributed the important paper called Women in ISKCON in Prabhupada's Times that was presented at the first annual Women's Ministry Conference that has been now published in The Emergence of Women's Voices in ISKCON, which is available on the International Vaishnavi Ministry website to download. Jyotirmayi was also an animal rights leader in the US and France for 14 years. Come join me, Jyotirmayi Prabhu, please. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you. You good?
Yeah.
Good.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Yeah. So I think I know that you were among the first devotees from France to join ISKCON. And
Not among the first, the 3 first.
The 3 first, okay. So tell us, can you tell us about that and how you came in contact with the movement and Prabhupada?
Yeah. So at that time, of course, remember it was a hippie time, everybody going to Kathmandu, and everybody, the young hippies were very, very interested in everything, anything having to do with India, with spiritual life. So my friends, Mandakini, Lavati, and myself, from the age of 16, we were already extremely interested in all these things, reading books, being very interested in Buddhism. And we even, Mandakini and I, we even went to, after having our high school diploma, we went to the university at the Sorbonne, studying ethnology, because we wanted to study the civilization, the
Ethnology,
religions.
that is? That was?
Ethnology,
Okay.
that the study of religion, civilization, culture, of the different countries. And we were studying all this because we wanted to know more and more about the spirituality of all these different countries. So we were completely in that mood. And at that time we had decided, so now we were 18, we had decided we were going to be Buddhist monks in Tibet or in Bhutan. We were going to go to these countries. So we were making, some money to buy our plane ticket to go there. And what do we see? We were already chanting on beach, but of course chanting.
Did you have any robes or anything at that time?
No,
just
but we were chanting the Buddhist mantras,
Okay.
And what do we see? He was also doing a little job. A young man, he was having beads. So we thought, what is that? He has beads. So immediately we start talking to him. And not only he had beads, but he was vegetarian. We were also vegetarian since the age of 18. And so immediately we want to ask questions about what it is. And he was one of the first devotees who were sent to France to start the movement in France. That is Umapati, Hanuman, Soridas, Jyotila, and Janardhan. So this was Soridas, and one of these first devotees. So he told us, but you're interested in spiritual life. Come to the American Center. We have programs every Sunday. So, of course, we went there, extremely happy to be there, and immediately chanted Hare Krishna with them and listened to the classes and took the prasadam, which were just some apples cut in pieces. That was the prasadam. And then...
This was 1969.
1969. And then they told us, in December 1969, they told us, hey, our spiritual master, Prabhupada, is going to be in London. So if you want to go see him. So we thought, well, good idea. We're going to get a Buddhist spiritual master. Let's try a Hindu spiritual master and see what we think about it. So we went hitchhiking, go to London. And of course, the devotees we were the 3 first French devotees. So as soon as we got there,
and who were they? You,
Mandakini, Ilavati.
Okay.
So immediately they told Prabhupada that the first French devotees were there. So it was on the day, we arrived exactly on the day of the installation of Radha London Ishvara by Prabhupada in the London temple. And Prabhupada immediately wanted to see us. So we were just arrived that already we were invited to go see Prabhupada. And that's when, in fact, the way I became a devotee was pretty intense, but internally, because I was impersonalist as a Buddhist, And Prabhupada was giving classes every morning. He was giving Bhagavatam classes, Bhagavad Gita classes. So, of course, we loved the chanting, we loved the classes, we loved the kirtans, everything. So we were attending to all the classes. And Prabhupada was talking about personalism. And when he was talking about this, I was always thinking, but no, I don't agree with that. I'm Buddhist, interpersonalist. But I was just thinking it in my mind. But Prabhupada, each time, this went on for 5 days. Each time, the next class he gave, he was giving arguments against all the things I had in my mind the day before,
So you'd listen to a class and then you'd have doubts, and then he'd answer the next day.
So each time I was with him in the class, each time I was having the kirtans and the japa, I was thinking, this is wonderful. I think I'm going to stay here and not go to Tibet, be a Buddhist monk. But then when I was out of the temple room, I was thinking, no, what am I thinking about? I'm going to Tibet. And this went on until finally I was convinced. And Prabhupada, that was 5 days, on the 5th day was doing initiations. And Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna, who was one of the devotees, he came a little later, but he was with the first devotees in London sent by Prabhupada were Jamuna and Gurudas, Malati and Shamsundar, and Mukunda and Janaki, the first devotees sent by Prabhupada to London. And Tamal Krishna came later, and Tamal Krishna said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna, I want to initiate the French girls.
Wow. 5 days after meeting Prabhupada.
Because, he talked with us. And
wow.
Tamal Krishna said, but Prabhupada, they've been here only for 5 days. You cannot initiate them.
Wow.
So finally, we were initiated by letter later, 1 month later, one
Okay.
month after, you know.
Okay.
So it's very funny. And one interesting thing which has to do with what my service became later is that Prabhupada, I had in my mind the idea of this, you know, Buddhist things, that when you meet the spiritual master, you've got some, you know, inside spirituality, transcendental fluid going into your brain, you know. And Prabhupada just talked completely normally to us, and yes, oh, you take example from Jamuna and Gurudas and Jamuna, Malati and Janaki, learn from them. And then he asked me, "Do you know how to type?" And I thought, what is that? What is a question to ask?
For a spiritualist, right?
Type.
Why would you type?
And it's only after that I realized that he was already thinking about translating his books. You know, the first French girls were there to translate his book.
Wow.
So that's the way we met Prabhupada for the first time, and that's the way we became devotees. So we stayed. And
that's ecstatic. 5 days and almost initiated. So did Prabhupada give you any personally give you any services? And do you have any particular memories that are sweet to you? Actually, let's do let's look at some pictures, Jyotirmayi. Okay. So Rukmini Priya, here you go.
So I will tell the story about all these pictures later on. This was the Salle Pleyel, a very, very big place where we had the engagement with Prabhupada. This was when Prabhupada was received at the City Hall of Paris. These two pictures are from there. I'm translating for Prabhupada. And this was when we did an initiation in the Garden of Luxembourg, which is a very, very known place in Paris. This shows how we would meet and talk with Prabhupada just like that in a hallway. And this is when I had all the Gurukul children and teachers go and see Prabhupada in New Mayapur. And this is when we were with George Harrison.
That was when you did the album?
This was after the album.
Okay, yeah, so were you recording at that picture or something?
No, because this was in Paris. I will tell the story.
Okay.
And when we did the record, the Radha Krishna temple, it was in London.
Okay. So, so now that we saw those pictures much too quickly, can you tell us a story about them?
So the first picture we saw where you see me and Prabhupada in this beautiful Vyasa sand from the Paris temple, and I'm standing next to him, translating for him. So of course, because I was among the first French devotees, immediately, and I spoke both French and English, then immediately I was put in charge of translating the books, the magazine first, then books, and translating whatever Prabhupada was in France. So that's why I had a lot of connection with Prabhupada, of association with Prabhupada. Another thing that I did, because I loved preaching, studying Prabhupada's books and preaching. So I was also organizing a lot of programs for Prabhupada to preach in different situations, engagements, we call them. So this was a place called Salle Pleyel. So of course it's not known for all of you, but Salle Pleyel is a very, very well-known place where there is big events going on. And for example, the Rolling Stones were singing there. Ray Charles were singing there, so it was a very, very famous place, this Salle Pleyel. Even though it was not that enormous, it was 2,000 seats. So we wanted to have Prabhupada go in a very well-known place with a lot of people coming. So we got to have this Salle Pleyel, and I made sure to have a lot of people coming.
You arranged it?
Yeah, I arranged it. I arranged it with others, but I arranged all the publicity.
Okay.
So the publicity was that I had enormous posters, enormous posters of Prabhupada, like big like this, and then smaller posters. All the posters were in all the different places of Paris, especially where there was a lot of students and other places. So you had all these big posters which were put here and there all over Paris. And I had smaller posters which were in the doors of the different stores. The people accepted to put the doors and announcing this engagement. So there was so many of these posters. I arranged all the devotees. You go to this street, you go to this street, you go to this street, to make sure it went to all the good places in Paris. And then when it was the day of Prabhupada's engagement, I was thinking, oh my God, I hope there's a lot of people. I hope there's a lot of people, because 2,000 seats, if it was not full, it would have been not looking good. And when we arrived, out of the 2,000 seats, there was 1,800 seats taken. So it was enormous. That was the biggest engagement, not only in France, but apart from the pandals in India at that time. That was in 1974. At that time, it was the biggest engagement anybody ever had in the West.
Wow.
With that many people. So that's why it's a very special situation. And then there is a story that happened with it. Is that, of course, you have not known that but in France at that time there was a lot of politics amongst the students, and it was the time of the communism. It was Marx, it was Mao Zedong. So it was a lot of
socialist,
socialist and communist students. So amongst the people who were there attending the program and Prabhupada's lecture and the kirtan, at one moment, Prabhupada was talking and giving an example. And to explain the authority of someone, he said, just like when you serve the king, because the king has authority, you also have authority because you are under the authority of the king. So when he said that, wow, the students, the communist students, they didn't like that. So they started to make all kind of noise and, all kind of sounds to show how they didn't like at all what Prabhupada had said. So after that, it calmed down, but one of the students he goes in front of Prabhupada's Yasasan and standing next to Prabhupada translating, and he's saying, why are you sitting on a throne? And other things, but in a very bad way, And I was translating for Prabhupada, so I didn't really want to say everything that boy had said, So I just said it in a nicer way. And Prabhupada said, no, tell me what he said. He wanted to know exactly. So I was obliged to tell Prabhupada exactly what that student said. So Prabhupada, no problem. He calls the boy and said, you can also sit here. You can talk about spiritual, transcendental topics, and you can sit here. The boy was so surprised. He didn't know what to say and went back to his seat.
Oh my gosh.
And then when we left, after the end of the program, when we left and we were in the car with Prabhupada said, okay, so now when I'm in France, you don't give me a Vyasasan anymore. You just give me a regular armchair, which is one of the example of the things I liked very much about Prabhupada, which is to always know how to adapt to different situations. So that's the story of the two first pictures. Then the next picture was...
I believe it's the reception.
Oh, yeah, reception. Okay. So, of course, at that time, it was not what happened later on with, all the different problems that the movement had. But at that time, in France, and I guess in America also, the population was very, very open. So we had a lot of articles in the newspapers, and there was no problem. So we arranged to have with the City Hall of Paris, with the president of the council of the City Hall of Paris, to have Prabhupada invited officially to the City Hall, and it was accepted without any difficulty. So this president of the council was called Jacques Dominati, and he arranged for us that his representative, which called Jacques Aswad, would receive Prabhupada. So we went into this beautiful city hall, the beautiful ancient monuments, buildings that there is in Paris. So we went there, and Prabhupada was sitting on a chair, and Yogesvara was translating what Prabhupada was saying, and I was translating what this council member, Jacques Aswad, was saying. So, in turn, we were like that translating. And Prabhupada did a beautiful talk. And first, Jacques Aswad made a very, very nice, reception, talking very, very nicely to Prabhupada, saying it was nice to receive a representative of the spirituality of India, really, really wonderful. So there was this, that's the picture you see where I'm translating and Yogesvara is holding the microphone. And after that, the lady who was in charge of the reception at the city hall, she took us to with Prabhupada, the devotees and Prabhupada, to visit the city hall. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful reception. Prabhupada was very, very happy. And here is something which shows how Prabhupada, one of the things I marveled about Prabhupada was how intelligent he was, how much knowledge he had, and how when he was speaking, it was so perfectly organized, constructed, his talk. Because very often, when we did this kind of thing, not all the devotees could come. Just a few would come, like at the city hall. So very often when I was going back to the temple, all the devotees were coming and, what did Prabhupada say? What did Prabhupada say? They wanted to know the whole story about what Prabhupada had said. And I was able to retell them the whole talk or the whole lecture that Prabhupada had given, because it was so perfectly organized that it was really easy for me to retell the lecture to the devotees. So this is one of the things I like very much about Prabhupada. So next picture was the Jardin du Luxembourg. Okay. Yeah. So this was Jardin du Luxembourg was in 1972. So it was before that. It was at the time when we didn't have a temple in Paris itself and in the suburb of Paris. And the temple was very, very small because it was just a regular family house, So there was to be initiations, but there was no way to fit all these devotees, because when we had an initiation in a particular city, the devotees from all over Europe would come, So there was a French devotees to be initiated, there was a German, there was the Dutch, there was the English, so many different devotees would come from different places, and there was no way to fit them in the temple room. So we did it outside, and we did it in this Jardin du Luxembourg, Garden of the Luxembourg, which is a very, very beautiful, very well-known place in Paris. And that's why you see this picture where we are outside in a kiosk in that garden. You see Prabhupada is in the back. There is one devotee who is being initiated in front of him, and I am sitting on the stairs translating Prabhupada's lecture. So that's the next picture. Then the next one was in the hallway.
The hallway?
Yeah. So
School of Architecture?
No, it's different. It is. I showed that picture because there is Prabhupada, there is the two devotees with me, and the reason I showed that picture is to show how Prabhupada, he would, it was so natural with us that we would be in the hallway and talk about things together. It didn't have to be only in his office, in his room, or in the temple room.
Almost casual.
Yeah, it was it could be very, very casual. That's why I showed that picture where we are just talking about the Bhagavad Gita. We're talking, because one of them is a translator, was translating with me the Bhagavad Gita. So we're just talking like that. And it reminds me of another story also similar to that, where very casual also. That was in New Mayapur later on, when Prabhupada, there was so many initiation, also so many devotees came from everywhere to be initiated, that at that time I was the head of the Gurukul New Mayapur. So I had to move out with the children to leave the space for all the devotees. So I had the children camping in, we made huts with straw bales, and it was wonderful living for a week inside these straw houses. But so I was having the Gurukuls. I was doing my business with the Gurukul, and at one moment I was going somewhere, and Prabhupada was coming the other way with all the devotees around him. So the temple president, the sannyasis, different men devotees. And I arrived the other way. And as soon as I arrived next to Prabhupada, that everybody stopped to start talking with me. Hi, Jyotirmayi, how are you doing? So this is to show also, it was so natural, so normal with us, so close to us. That's why I wanted to show that picture.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
And the next one is George Harrison, I think.
I think maybe the George Harrison picture, yeah.
Yeah, that's the George Harrison picture. So this is very special also. This George Harrison picture is in I think it's in 1972 or 1970, yeah. So when we were in London, it was the time when the devotees had met with George Harrison, who was already very interested. Not just him and the other Beatles were very interested in spiritual life. They went to India with the Guru Mahesh Yogi, so we were already very interested in that. And so devotees went to meet George Harrison and the other Beatles. Also, but that's something you don't know, but when they first arrived in London, before Prabhupada came to install the deities, they were living in the house, these first devotees, and Prabhupada were living in the house of John Lennon. So maybe not everybody knows that. But so Shyam Sundar and Guru Das, they kept relationship with the Beatles and especially with George Harrison. So in London, they had the Apple Studios, that was the Beatles studio, and they had already done a record with the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And now George Harrison and the devotees, the London devotees, were preparing another record, which became called the Radha Krishna Temple record, which was with different songs, Govinda, Madhipurusha, different songs. And in that record, George Harrison was doing all the musical arrangements. Mukunda was playing the mridanga. Jamuna was the lead singer. Yogesvara was the second lead singer. Leelavati, not Ilavati, but Leelavati was also one of the lead singers. And I was with others in the chorus. So I was as long as we did the record, I was going with Jamuna and the others regularly to the Apple Studios with George Harrison to do that record. So I'm singing in that record.
Okay.
and then, as we were in London, George Harrison told us that he had been invited in Paris by, of course, the Beatles were so well known at that time. He had been invited to a place called Chez Maxime, which was a very, very famous place where all the rich people were going. So he said, "Well, I'm invited to talk there and to sing there. I want you to come." So Jamuna immediately she arranged that her and me and Mandakini and Yogesvara and a few others, we went to Paris to be with George Harrison. And that picture is when we are chanting the mantras in that Chez Maxime place, wow. Famous place. And so you see I'm on one side and Jamuna is in the middle.
Was that well attended? Was that a lot of people there?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have time to say there was a funny story about George Harrison. If you want, I can.
You can say, but we have so much to say, and we're half an hour already.
No. Okay. Sorry, I won't tell that funny story about George Harrison. So now the next one was the Gurukul.
Yeah.
So the Gurukul picture is, and that is another example of how the things I love about Prabhupada is that he's so practical in his understanding of how to do things. So when Prabhupada invited all the children to come, at that time, before that, when I took this Gurukul in New Mayapur, the children were chanting japa along with everybody in the temple room, and they were given these big beads like everybody else, and it was really not good for them. It was very, very difficult. They were very unhappy. So I changed all this, and I did quarter of a round of japa beads for the smaller children, half japa beads for the little bigger children, and no full japa beads for the children. They were too young, they were all between 5 and 10. And they chanted all together on the special rhythm, and they loved it. They were so enthusiastic to chant. But I was very much criticized. What is that? What did you invent? This is not the way to chant. I just kept on doing. And when Prabhupada came to New Mayapur, he wanted to see all the children and teachers, so we all went. That's the picture you saw. And Prabhupada told them, chant Hare Krishna. So immediately the children, they started to do it the way they used to do it with us, with the teachers. And Prabhupada loved it.
So they were all chanting at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. But everybody together, not each one individually. And Prabhupada, he liked it so much, he told them, keep on chanting. And then they chanted and chanted, and Prabhupada said, stand up, chant. And everybody stood up and started to chant and went on chanting and chanting.
Oh,
and Prabhupada loved it.
what an ecstatic moment.
And so it was.
And the children must have been really.
They were completely in ecstasy, in bliss. And I wanted to show that picture to give the example of Prabhupada had always told me and others, use your common sense. And that's what I liked about Prabhupada, being so practical and able to adapt to different situations. And so I was practical. I used my common sense. I said, okay, children, they don't chant on big beads. We have to adapt it to children. And Prabhupada was very happy. So that's the last picture.
That's beautiful. And, you've mentioned now a couple of qualities of Prabhupada that was important to you and stood out. But are there any others that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, is intelligence, because I'm always intellectual. So I love everybody who's very intelligent. So intelligent. His knowledge, I love knowledge, studying books. So his knowledge, I was in ecstasy with the knowledge he had of all the different books. And then I was translating all these books. That he was so rational. That's what I liked, He was at the same time transcendental, but at the same time completely rational, completely logical, completely down to earth, practical. Also, something that maybe devotees don't know, but he was also very humoristic. Very often you make everybody laugh. I like that also. So I really love these qualities of Prabhupada, and I always try to adapt to the way he was and to act the way he did. And so
can you give us an example?
But this is one example, using my common sense to adapt to a particular situation. And another example was that that's another thing I didn't tell you, the stories. We don't have picture, but I will tell you the stories later. It's when I was having me and Yogesvara and Prabhupada, we were having plenty of very well-known people, dignitaries, personalities to come and see Prabhupada in his room when we were in the Paris temple. And so when Prabhupada was there, of course, there were so many devotees coming to see Prabhupada that they wanted to go into his room. And the secretaries, they were saying, "Oh, stop, don't come." And they didn't want the devotees to be bothering Prabhupada coming always to his room. But Prabhupada, when he found out that they were saying, no, don't come, Prabhupada said, no, let them come in, because they have to learn how to preach. Because when we are having all these dignitaries coming, it was an example it could teach them how to preach properly to the different people. And so he wanted them to come, So this is an example of how practical Prabhupada is, that let them come in and learn how to preach. And that's the other thing which I love so much with him, being so logical and rational and able to adapt to all the different situations, is that the personalities we were bringing to him were very, very different. There was people, they were professors, some people were journalists, some people were politicians. One of them was the one who started the first and only place where you could have vegetarian food, a place called La Vie Claire. It was the first one at that time existing in France. And when I was seeing how he was talking to them, it was incredible. He was fully adapting to each of them. Like, for example, one of them was Professor Lacombe, which was the biggest French professor on Indologist, which means, Hindu philosophy. But he happens to be not just a professor. He was following what he was teaching. He was a follower of Ramanuja. And he had known Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Wow. So
when Prabhupada met him in his room in Paris, the way he was talking to him, it's like they were two old friends, They even were speaking in Hindi. And so such a natural, friendly discussion. I had never seen Prabhupada talking to someone like that, And when he was talking to Christian, no, he didn't discuss fighting philosophy. No, because anyway, it's all love of God with the Christian also. As soon as I was talking to a Christian, whether it was a priest at Pujari, whether it was a cardinal on the higher levels of priesthood, he would always start talking about not eating animals because animals have a soul, So he was adapting, you see. So I've seen that, and that's why personally, whenever I was preaching or whenever I was in a situation when I had to take a decision, I was always thinking, what would Prabhupada have said? What would have Prabhupada done? I was trying to put myself in his mind, and in order to be like him, rational, logical, practical, and do the best.
Common sense.
Common sense, yeah. Use your common sense.
Common sense.
Yeah. So these are the qualities I love the most about.
Wow. And how would you say that Prabhupada provided protection? I mean, we talked about that before.
Yeah.
What do you think
so I have a few stories. Of course, what you have to know, because I joined in 1969 at 19, so it's a whole different story from what happened later. But you see, when Pranada was telling about the different services I did, one of them was temple commander. You don't see much temple commander or women, but I was temple commander
later in the 70s.
So at the beginning of the movement with Prabhupada, there was no difference at all between men and women. Prabhupada was fully talking to us, dealing with us exactly the same way as with the men. There was absolutely no difference.
Same kinds of services?
Yeah, same kind of services, everything exactly the same. No discrimination, no distinction. It started in America, and then it came from America to France, and it started to France in 1974. So I had, fortunately, a lot of years where we didn't have this problem. And then when this problem came, it was very, very difficult for me because I was always giving classes, I was always giving lectures, I was giving conferences in the universities. I was always in charge of a department because we started a movement. There was nothing before we started. So men, women were starting something, the Gurukul, the public relation, the preaching, the translating, whatever it was. And the example of how Prabhupada never made any distinction is, for example, that when I joined, first French person, and Mandakini stayed in London, Ilavati was married to Mapati, went to America, so I was the one French person. So I started immediately the translation of the magazines first, and then the small books, and then the bigger books. So I was in charge of translation. I had discussion with Prabhupada about translation, exchange of letters about translation. So I was fully under Prabhupada's care in charge of the translation. And what happened in 1975, suddenly I was told, because it was a time when in America the women, they could not be headmistress anymore, they could not be head of the daily worship, they cannot be in charge of anything anymore. So I was told, okay, no more in charge of the translation. When I had been training the devotees in translating, I'd been doing it for 5 years. You're a woman, no more in charge of translation.
They said because you're a woman, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I had to be a man who was in charge of the translation. So how Prabhupada defended us is that at that time I didn't react. I was just completely, what's the word? Complete anxiety, but I didn't fight back. But later on, there was the same thing about. So that's why I went and did the public relation, and then I went and did the Gurukula because I was too disgusted. I just didn't want anymore to work on the translation because the way I'd been treated because of being a woman. But I was still giving classes. I had always given classes from the time I joined, all the time, wherever I was, in whatever country I was doing the translation. I was giving classes. So, but I started to feel how they didn't dare to tell me to stop giving classes, but at the same time, they were disturbed, that the men were disturbed, and especially the leaders, that I was giving classes, to the point where I, one day with the Yogesvara, we went to see Prabhupada. Prabhupada was coming every year to London, to Paris, so we were seeing Prabhupada very often to New York. We always saw Prabhupada at least once a year for a few days. So we went to see Prabhupada, and I asked Prabhupada, Jyotirmayi has always been giving classes. I've been giving classes. Can the women give classes? We have been giving classes for years, but and Prabhupada said, of course, Jyotirmayi can give class. You can give class. Yogesvara, your husband is a Brahmin. You are a Brahmin. You give class. So, I had the proof from Prabhupada directly that even though I was a woman, I could give classes and lectures and conferences in universities and all this. So this was one first way to protect me. And later on, it was still, going on, this mentality. I was feeling still embarrassed. So there was a time when we were in, I was in Paris. And when I was doing the translation, sometimes I had a difficulty to translate something. So I was sending a letter to Prabhupada to ask him about the particular word. And this was a translation of the word Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because you cannot say it exactly the same in French. It doesn't mean anything. You have to arrange it. So I proposed Prabhupada different translation, and he answered me. But at the same time, I was really, I asked, No, that's a different story. No, I told that story also, but it's a different story. This other story was that we were in New York, and it was wonderful to be with the BBT, with all the other devotees working on the English books. We were working with Yogesvara on the French books, but I couldn't have new French devotees to train into translation. I thought, well, just me alone is not enough. We need more devotees. So I was in the temple, in the prasadam room in New York. I was looking at Prabhupada's picture and thinking, what should I do? What should I do? Should I go back to France? Should I stay in New York? And at the same time, when I was praying like that to Prabhupada's picture, I sent a letter to Prabhupada to ask him about the translation of the word Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Prabhupada answered me, yeah, you translate that way, so good. That's what I've been doing since then. And at the same time, he said, you are in New York with Yogesvara during the translation, but you should be in France during the translation. And he said, Bhagavan, who was in America, is now going to go to France, so to be the GBC. So you go to France and you do your translation there. So you see, just praying to Prabhupada's picture, and he answered me. And then, who was it? Satsvarok? Yeah, once he asked Prabhupada the question about that. He said about this, talking with Prabhupada, but in the mind only and in the heart. And Prabhupada told him, the spiritual master is with you in as much as you are with him, So the more we really very, very strongly think about Prabhupada, Prabhupada hears our thinking and answers us. But it has to be very, very strong, very, very personal. That this proved from what he said to Satsvarok that that's the way we can have dealings with Prabhupada, even when we are not in the same place, in a different way than later.
Did you experience that Prabhupada giving protection to others besides yourself? Did you see that?
Well, no, it was mainly in my own. The way I knew more about these things was from hearing from others,
right.
And also I wanted to say about the relationship with Prabhupada, which is so strong, is that when that would be your last question about. I answer later. It's part of another question. No, it was mainly things with me. Or for example, always it was not so much a protection as it was the dealing exactly the same way with men and women. There is two more examples. Another example was that it was in 1971. we were in the second Paris temple, and when we have Bhagavad Gita class or Bhagavatam class, we say the verse. Someone says the verse in Sanskrit, and everybody repeats, line by line. So Prabhupada was giving class, and he noticed that when I was repeating the verses, I said the Sanskrit very, very well compared to the others who didn't pronounce so well as I was pronouncing. The reason was that when I was in New York, Nitai was working with Prabhupada and Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam for the Sanskrit verses. He taught me how to pronounce properly Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. So Prabhupada noticed that I was saying the Sanskrit words of the verses very well compared to the other devotees. So Prabhupada said, okay, from now on, it will be Jyotirmayi who will be leading the reading, the recitation of Sanskrit verse. You see, he didn't think, it's a woman who is going to be talking in front of the man. No, it was just natural, so many different instances like that when Prabhupada was dealing with us completely in the same way. Another one was that when we talk about the intelligence of women, is that one day I thought, because I was so much preaching university, so I was thinking, maybe I should go back to university, finish my diploma. I didn't finish my ethnology diploma because I joined the movement, so I stopped my studies at the Sorbonne and went to move into the temple. But I thought, maybe if I could finish. So Yogesvara was going at that moment, he was going to see Prabhupada. And I said, hey, ask Prabhupada what he thinks about my going back to university and to the Sorbonne and finishing my studies and getting my diploma, so I would be able to give classes officially on Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Vaishnavism in the university. So Yogesvara talked with Prabhupada and said, what do you think of that? And Prabhupada said, yes, she can do it. She's a very intelligent girl. So you see, he didn't say, a woman, No, he never had this kind of relationship with the women. He always treated us exactly the same way.
So, you were speaking about your university preaching and how in that preaching, you were getting reviews for Prabhupada's books. Now, you told me when you got back from Mayapur that you saw something there. So what did you see?
Yeah, so at that time, the books were being published in French, so we needed, like for the American books, we needed to have reviews, saying appreciation of Prabhupada's books. So because I was the one doing the public relation, I was contacting various extremely known personalities, professors and others, to write the reviews. And you can still see in the French Bhagavad Gita, there's the reviews of these personalities. So I was the one who got all these reviews. And I was recently in Mayapur. In Mayapur, there was this big billboard where there was reviews of personalities on Prabhupada's books. And what did I see? One of them was the review in French of this professor called François Chenique, whom I got with Yogesvara to write the review, and it was there in Mayapur, at the TOVP in Mayapur.
Hare Krishna, your service is carrying forward.
I was so happy when I saw that. Yeah,
eternal service credits. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
I think we met the first time in 1997 when you came to Los Angeles for the first Women's Ministry Conference. And there you presented the paper, Women in ISKCON in Prabhupada's Times.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the ministry? And you were also a regional secretary for the GBC in France.
Yeah. So at that time, the GBC in France was Paramgati Swami, and he chose me to be his regional secretary. So I used to have a lot of dealings about the GBC work and all that with him. And at that time, I decided that I was going to write about the way, because things got worse and worse in how the women were treated in the movement. So I was going to write a report on how it was between Prabhupada and us, the women, when Prabhupada was there. So I wrote this report, 20 pages, called Women in ISKCON in Prabhupada's Time. So I wrote it because, I wanted to make sure that this would not be forgotten, that people who now didn't know how Prabhupada was dealing with women.
Yeah, it became so that we didn't realize that this wasn't something Prabhupada instituted.
Exactly. Like, for example, I give you one funny example. One devotee, one of the newest devotee, who told me, but the women were never allowed to do artik to the deities at the time when there is guests, because at that time you could do artik as a woman, but only when there was nobody in the temple for the 4 o'clock offering, but otherwise you were not allowed. And he was convinced, and I told him, no, women were doing artik to the deities at any time, Mongol artik, lunchtime, whatever. He wouldn't believe me. So I went to take a picture where I am doing artik to the Radha Ishvara Deities in Paris in front of Prabhupada. So I thought it's very important because people are going to forget. It has to be documented. And something very, very nice happened is that because I was a regional secretary with the GBC of France, there was meetings, and once there was a European GBC meetings, which took place in Germany. And so there was all these GBCs were there and regional secretary, and I was the only woman there. And
what year was that?
I think it was in 98, something like that. And Rakesh Swami was the GBC for Germany, and he did something really nice. Without telling me, I was really surprised, but a very beautiful surprise. Is that when I sit there with all these men around this immense table, I see that he had made photocopies of my report, and he had put a copy of my report.
This one, Women in ISKCON.
Yeah, this
time.
one.
Wow.
He had made the photocopies of the 20 pages, and he had put it in front of each of the GBC, each of the regional secretaries of Europe.
Wow.
So that was really, really nice. And it started to make its way through that. It started to make its way all over Europe, America. Even at that time, we had the temple in Brazil. And Jyotirmayi told me that in Brazil, 38 women gathered together to say that they wanted things to be back to the way it was, according to what they read in my report. And again, about this women's ministry, another thing that happened is that when this report came out, I was invited in Spain, in Belgium, in France, in Holland, in different places. I was in England. I was invited to come and talk about this report, because devotees were really concerned about that.
The loss of the factual history.
Yeah. And what happens that I remember when in Anistagosti about this subject in Belgium, in Bangladesh, the devotees, when they heard my report, some of them were crying. So many of them came to thank me for having written this report. And it was not just the women. Many men came to see me. And they were crying and they were thanking me and they were telling me, we're so happy that we know that we don't have to be nasty to the women, It was very, very, very...
Yeah, it's one of the... that emergence of women's voices in ISKCON that I compiled. It's an anthology of 30 devotees' writings. And it's an important, also, historical document. But I think the unique thing about your piece in there is that it's very concise. It's not short, but it's very concise and to the point and well presented. And so it's like a very important piece in the whole book.
Yeah. And also because it gives the example, not just from me, but from many, many, many persons. Right. The reason was that, you see, when I joined in December 1969, all these devotees who came to France, who came to London, they were devotees who had had a lot of association with Prabhupada.
Yeah.
You know, so at that time I was telling you how we were going on sankirtan, Harinam, chanting in the street and distributing magazine morning, afternoon, and evening. You know, so it was constantly out chanting. And when we came back in the evening, Jamuna and all these first devotees, Jamuna, Gaudas, Shamsundar, Marathi, Mukunda Janaki, they would tell us stories about Prabhupada because they had a lot of association with Prabhupada.
Yeah.
And in fact, this was supposed to be the answer to a question about giving Prabhupada to others who have not known him. You know?
Right, yeah.
And it's very, very important because even though for us, you know, when we joined, we didn't have all this association as much as they had, but just hearing from them, telling us all these stories about their dealing with Prabhupada, we were loving Prabhupada as much as they did just from hearing from them, you know. Yeah. So, and another thing also about, I forgot to tell you about this Prabhupada being very, very close to these devotees, whether women devotees, is that when Prabhupada was here in London for these first 5 days, you know, it was just such ecstasy, the kirtans with Prabhupada, it was completely incredible. And the Prabhupada one day said, I don't remember to who he said it, but Mandakini and me, we were there, you know, dancing, chanting, the kirtan dancing, and Prabhupada said, they are like two flowers blowing in the wind.
Hare Krishna. Oh my God. Somebody else said something about you being in ecstasy on Sankirtan.
Yeah. So because we were always on Sankirtan, you know, you cannot be chanting Hare Krishna all day long and not be in ecstasy, you know. So Radha Krishna was one of the Sankirtan leaders when we were chanting Harinam in the street. So one day he wrote a letter to Prabhupada and he said, well, we have this devotee in London, Jyotirmayi. She's always in ecstasy. Is it real ecstasy?
Well,
and Prabhupada answered him and he said, yes, this is real ecstasy.
Okay, so tell us, was it real ecstasy?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. There's this feeling, you know, being in the street like that, chanting for hours and hours. And I forgot to tell you something also about, it's so funny, about this record that we made with George Harrison. This record was called Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
For many months, it was Top of the Pops, which means it was the first of the first 10 songs most known all over the world, you know. So much that all the, you know, at that time there was places where they were selling records, you know, there is not anymore now, but at that time there was that. And so often when we were chanting in the streets of London, we were hearing this Radha London Ishvara Radha Krishna Temple album being sung, being played in the store, and we were walking in front, so everybody was looking at us.
Like, wow.
And because of course George Harrison was so well known, we were doing the evening also, chanting in the street in the evenings. And at that time the nightclubs, they were much earlier than now, you know, after it became very, very late. But at that time, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock was the nightclubs were starting. So when we were chanting in the street, the nightclubs, they were inviting us. No, they were not playing us. They were inviting us to go inside on the stage and chant Hare Krishna. So it was such a wonderful, wonderful time.
So
you can
have you? I have to ask a couple more questions. We're at 1 hour, but we have to extend this for just a couple minutes. So have you experienced any ecstasy like that again? You know, that time when you were chanting all day long like that? Yeah. Was that like the height of a certain ecstatic experience for you? Or
yeah, I think that this chanting Hare Krishna almost all day long was really when I was feeling the most ecstasy. The second was when we were having kirtan with Prabhupada in the temple. It's just amazing. You know, when Prabhupada is leading the kirtan, the way he's doing, you know, slowly and then faster and faster, and then everybody's standing up. And I mean,
And everyone could follow the tune.
Yeah, everybody, that was Prabhupada's tune. It was not invented, made up tunes. It was Prabhupada's tune. It was Prabhupada's way also of going from slowly to faster and faster. And then Prabhupada would have a stand up, and that was
And his
really
presence was extraordinary. It wasn't just the way he did the kirtan, but being
his presence and the way he did the kirtan. And of course, I mean, you see what most people don't know is that at that time we were living in a very, very austere situation.
Right.
You know, sometimes we had no heating. We were coming to a temple under our sleeping bags.
I know some people who left Paris because it was so austere. You know, you had to find like some little corner to try to sleep because
Exactly.
people were sleeping.
At one moment, I was sleeping in the bathtub.
Right.
You always try to find a little place where you can sleep. So I was sleeping in the bathtub. But because Prabhupada was there, the love, the ecstasy was so strong that we didn't care. It's not that we were suffering, you know, from this austerity. We didn't care. You know, some people were thinking, oh, yeah, it was having harm. No.
That's perfect.
Full
okay, I just have two quick questions, Rukmini Priya. So what are some of the things that you're grateful for from Prabhupada?
It is one day Prabhupada said, whatever would happen to you in life, whatever you have learned in Krishna consciousness will always be useful for you.
He said that to you?
Yeah, he said, no, I don't know if it was to me or in general, but he said that. And you mentioned how for 14 years I was leader of animal rights in different countries. And I was extremely, extremely successful, more than many other people. But the reason was because I had been trained in preaching by Prabhupada, in dealing with other people, because, you know, the devotees, they were not paid for their work. You know, it has to be the leaders who are to enthuse them and to get them engaged and to train them. So I had been doing that for so many years, for 35 years in a movement, that I used all these skills that I had learned from Prabhupada's example and from living in a temple and preaching in a temple. I used it in my animal rights work, and that's why I was so successful. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that Prabhupada said. That was very, very, very important. And I wanted to mention one more thing I'm going over, but it's very important for devotees to know that, is that, you know, I told you, I used to love preaching, giving classes, giving lectures, organizing all these lectures in the universities, because I love studying Prabhupada books. And Prabhupada once, he told the sannyasis, when you study my books, you have to, because it's not in order of topics. You have to take all through my books and classify the topics. You know what I have said on all these different books on this subject matter, on that subject matter, on that subject matter. And he said that to the sannyasis to teach them how to preach. And because I heard about it, I did that. You know, I had notebooks with everything classified by subject matter.
People don't understand how important that was, because now we have the database and search engines.
But that's how we did it. We did it ourselves at that time. There was no computer or anything.
You had to actually go to the sources and find.
Yeah. So whenever I was reading Prabhupada's books, I was always picking up the parts I wanted and putting them in that classified place, in that place. And so whenever I was giving classes or lectures, if it was on such or such subject matter, then I would go to my book. Okay, this is what is in Prabhupada's book, such chapter, such books, such Bhagavatam, such verse of Bhagavad Gita. And this is why the devotees, they love my classes, is because it was very, like Jyotirmayi's classes, it was very erudite, is that the word?
That's
very, very much. It was not just preaching to them on sankirtan. It was they were learning really the philosophy, and they were always thanking me for my classes and asking questions. Nobody was falling asleep when I was giving class, even though we didn't sleep that much.
So listen, before we go, you have to tell everyone you're writing a book. What's the book?
Yeah. So many devotees wrote books about their experience with Prabhupada in Krishna consciousness. But for us, because we came later in the movement in '69, I have decided that I was going to write a book, not just my memories, but the memories of all the first French devotees or American devotees or Italian devotees or German devotees, whoever was living in France from 1969 when it started to 1976 when it was the last visit of Prabhupada. So I have interviewed many devotees. I had other devotees interview many devotees, and I have tapes and CDs and records of.
Do you need help transcribing that?
Yes, I need help transcribing.
Anybody wants to transcribe?
So some are in English, so I need people who know English to transcribe, and some, of course, are in French, so I need people who speak French to transcribe. So everything is being transcribed, and then from the stories, the remembrance of all these different devotees, of whom I would put the name of all the devotees who were there during these years. I condense what they say, that take important, right. And then I write the story chronologically. Such year, this and this happened.
So it's like Srila Prabhupada in France.
Yes, it's Srila Prabhupada in France. It's not my memory, it's the memory of all the devotees who were in France about Srila Prabhupada in France from 1969 to 1976.
Jyotirmayi, I wish we had another 2 hours, but we have to end. Thank you. I know this was not, like the first thing you wanted to do. You have a lot of other things to do, and the technology is challenging. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming and being with us. It's so good to have your association. And thank you everyone for being with us. And as you see, the screen is scrolling. Please get a copy of Bond of Love. It's available on Amazon. I think it's also available on Book Rights. But anyway, pick up a book and dive into the nectar of the Bond of Love. Thank you for watching. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.